Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to narcissism. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you all are doing great. I am going to say a very big shout out to this young man. This young man is really amazing. And please do well to follow him up, right? And so I came across this video where he was talking about the white refusal to grieve and also talked about what went wrong with whiteness. Oh my goodness. I don't even know how I found this video, but this is just something all of us really need to see. And I am saying a very big shout out to every one of you for giving me the opportunity to learn through you and also being able to bring some certain videos here to also enlighten every one of us on some certain things going on. And now when he was talking about that white refusal to grieve, that actually caught my attention. Why did it catch my attention? It caught my attention because there are some certain things I noticed about people's behavior, right? These people's behavior that sometimes is kind of weird, but when you learn your history, understand some certain things, I am sure you will never be confused. So a lot of people were like, refusal to grieve is actually a choice that they made, and they are still being, and it is still being made. But at this particular point that we are talking, that's why majority of my people, when they say I am not forgiven, they are not. They don't want to listen. They don't want to hear any apologies because when we talk about grieving, you know that grieving requires a whole lot of capacity of emotions for you to grieve, and when you grieve, sometimes you try as much as you can to understand why you are grieving and also give support to communities. When you grieve, you understand some certain kind of things, especially what other people have been through. They have the reason why they do not do it. Let's get into this.
We're going to talk about whiteness in a way that I haven't heard it in a lot of other places, but this is what went wrong. Like, if you ever wanted to know what went wrong, like, this is what went wrong. Like, what? Like, you ever looked at them and, wondered how they all made these crazy decisions? This is how it happened. Okay? Like, the betrayal was against memory itself. So, it didn't start with slavery or colonization. Those were actually symptoms of a greater issue. It began when white identity was constructed by erasing rootedness. European tribes like the Irish, the Scots, the Germans, the Norse, they did have indigenous ways of living, right, of being. Seasonal living, oral storytelling, grief rituals, communal economies. When empire logic, Rome, Catholic Church, feudalism, consolidated power in Europe, it forced those people to forget their rootedness and to replace memory with domination. The root was severed, survival through control. They didn't metabolize anything, not connection, right? Just control again. This was the first recursion. This is when they turned in on themselves, right? The first rise of this unprocessed entropy inside whiteness. It's rootless survival. It's identity by domination. It's memory replaced by mythic supremacy. And then that's how you end up with expansion without metabolization. So when Europeans came to the New World, they didn't arrive whole, right? They arrived already severed, already looping. They didn't integrate the grief of losing old Europe. They exported it. They didn't mourn their exile from memory. They externalized it on the people they colonized. Conquest wasn't just greed, it was spiritual panic. Because if you're not rooted in memory, you only feel alive by expanding your domination, by making more land, more wealth, more slaves, more laws, more mirrors, and thus their entropy, their unprocessed experiences exploded. But it was coded as civilization. So when American identity was built, it wasn't metabolized selfhood. It was built on dumping these unprocessed experiences, these entropy onto others. So indigenous people got labeled uncivilized to offload their own severed ancestral memory, right? Black people were property to offload their terror of being spiritually homeless because they felt spiritually homeless. Immigrants were treated like threats to offload their fear of being spiritually replaceable. Projection became policy. Projection became culture. Projection became destiny. America never healed from Europe. It just renamed its wounds. So every genocide, right? Every stolen plantation, every gentrified city, every new suburb, every Wall Street boom, every school built on erasure, every church built without confession is material success reinforced. It is material success reinforced spiritual entropy. It is material success reinforcing, right, spiritual unprocessed experiences for them. So the more whiteness succeeded externally, the more it hollowed out internally. So their collective brokenness rose because every reward for survival was tied to a denial of memory, right? The maw grew, the silence deepened, the performance sharpened. So here's just the facts, right? It was really a bit of a 4-stage process. Severance from ancestral rootedness, loss of metabolized memory, survival through domination, entropy weaponizes progress, projection on the others, externalization of internal panic, and reinforcement through wealth. So that it looped, got hardened in the culture. So white America's original sin is not slavery. It's the refusal to mourn the first loss of rootedness. So this is all just a disgusting projection. It's really this humiliating. Like I want people to sit with that. Like, we're watching them grieve in public. All of this is grief. All of it. Rape, slavery, genocide, imperialism. Those were the fevered dreams of a people trying not to remember what it felt like to be abandoned by their own history. So every time memory tried to return, they doubled the performance instead of softening. This is why black people look so nasty to them. Because if we can build a culture, even in the midst of that, of exile, it makes all of this grief look meaningless. It has to be destroyed in that way. Right? So they have no home. You ask a black person where it all starts from, you might get answers like slavery in Africa. You ask a white person, you'll hear Europe. Okay. But you hear exactly the same. Africa, Europe, they're as disconnected, if not worse. and they've been materially rewarded for it through this reinforcement. So this was a crazy deep take, but this is exactly what's going on, for sure. This is just a follow-up in the series of posts that we're doing today on this topic. But one of the big issues in that we're dealing with in society, in American society, is white refusal to grieve. Okay, so we're just gonna go through all the opportunities. We have post-European collapse, right? The 1300s to the 1500s. This is the first grief denied. Black Death wiped out half of Europe. Indigenous European spiritualities got crushed by the church. And land, family lineages, and ancient communal memories were lost. They had a crossroads. Mourn the grief, rebuild the rootedness with humility and communal memory. Here's what they did. Escape through domination, colonize lands, overwrite loss with conquest. The result was the grief got projected outward, right? And colonialism born from mourning denied. Then they had the first land theft in the Americas, the 1600s, right? The indigenous peoples encountered white settlers starving, desperate, vulnerable. They had a choice. Recognize indigenous humanity, create mutual societies of healing and exchange. They chose to demonize, dehumanize, and enslave because recognizing indigenous humanity would have meant admitting so white survival was fragile. Okay, that projection hardened into a myth, manifest destiny, right? Then the next chance they had, after the American Revolution, freedom defined by exclusion, 1776 to the 1800s. White settlers declared freedom from British rule, right? They had black slaves, indigenous tribes, poor whites were still in prison. They had a choice. Expand the concept of liberty to all bodies, healed through integrated memory, right? But instead, they chose to redefine freedom as scarcity, only accessible through hierarchy. So the result was that liberty became a brand worn by those who could afford to forget, right, who they crushed beneath it. I can say that again. Liberty became a brand worn by those who could afford to forget who they crushed beneath it, right? And then after the Civil War, they had another chance, right? 1865, 1877. Right, the shallow reconstruction. Right, here's what was going on. Slavery was abolished. Black citizenship was supposedly enshrined. Right, what they needed to do was have a national confession, reparative memory work, ritualized grief for what was done. Here's what they did: industrialized suffering, rewrote history, lost cause narrative. Build caste systems. Jim Crow, trauma deepened, memory survive. But. It's so fickle. You're going to hear how many times they messed this up. The trauma deepened, memory was getting erased, and they had systems built in a hidden reverb because they're still mourning themselves. And then after World War II, we get suburbanization as escapism. Soldiers return from war, GI Bill offered wealth and housing, but not to black veterans. So only thing they needed to do was share resources, build an integrated society of shared grief and triumph. They chose to segregate, redline, and isolate so that whiteness could feel safe without metabolizing collective horror because they were horrified. So suburbans became spiritual keeps, frozen, smiling, quietly rotting from disconnection. And then we had the Civil Rights Movement, 1950s, 1970s. The performance of listening, they learned it, right? Black Americans demanded full humanity, not partial belonging, right? White liberals marched, but metabolized almost nothing, right? They had a choice. Public confession, institutional transformation, economic repair. They chose cosmetic inclusion. They applied MLK after death. suppress Malcolm in real life, like in the present, right? And the result is that we see the image of progress replaced by the memory of pain, and then we see diversity becoming a brand, not a covenant. And then we get the Obama era, right? 2008, 2016. We get the myth of post-racialism. So we get the first black president elected, a fragile chance for honest racial reckoning, right? Here's what we got. Here's what we needed to do. National soul work, deep cultural unlearning of projection systems. But instead they denied, celebrate, and then quietly retaliate. White resentment got weaponized. Fascism flirted with openly again. And then this is when the mall starts to show its face fully, right? And the mall's the MAW. It's a parallel system. I've gone through the other things. It's just a good mention for anybody who's seen that. And in 2020, like we get the pandemic, George Floyd, and this is when the unprocessed experiences spike for him. So the historical moment, we had a global lockdown, black deaths visible on camera, and false solidarity floods the internet, right? All they needed to do was to stop, grieve, repair, dismantle false systems fully. That's all they needed to do. Instead, they performed, branded, monetized trauma, politicized survival. The collapse hastened, right? Memory weaponized into identity wars, right? The curation, right, of the mirror sovereign was hitting critical mass, right? So at this point, and I'll put up a little chart right here just so y'all can see the whole layout. This was non-stop opportunities to turn around, and they have it. At every major crossroad, white America has offered the same sacred invitation. The same invitation got offered. Grieve what you lost, name what you stole, tend to what you shattered, return to what you hoarded, become human again. That's what we offer every time. That's what the world offers every time. That's what has been offered. And every time they chose this, curate the image, protect the empire, forget the wound, keep moving. And so their unprocessed experiences rose, the loop tightened, and the blackness of their narcissism of the mall grew thicker, still whispering, you're not broken, you're exceptional. That's what they keep hearing. But the thing is that it's going to keep screaming it until the roof rots in silence. It's going to be chaos for them in this kind of way. So here's the thing. Right now, I would say it is like culture for them is in the middle of a death spiral, right? We're in between where collapse is visible but still denied, and where judgment is like an unprocessed mirror, right? Where collapse no longer needs permission, it simply reveals itself. It's gonna look like revelations to them, right? Like the denial is louder than the metabolization, the performance is more rewarded than the grief, the curation is more accessible than the confession. So, but hold on, but death spiral does not mean total doom. Death spiral equals momentum toward collapse. Okay. Unless a radical metabolization interrupts this loop, it's going to be a problem. The metaphor isn't falling off of a cliff. It's falling inward toward a black hole. And the interruptions are still possible, but they require sacred violence against this type of system. My bad, I cut that off. But the thing is that here's what they need to do. They need to tear off curated memory, weeping publicly without monetization. Right? Dismantling not just systems, but survival identities built on forgetting, and naming what was stolen and returning it without conditions. That's literally what's happening. Is there a window for them? Yes, but it's tiny and it's closing fast. Right? We're not in the choice era anymore for them. I need people to understand that. They've had 8 chances. More than 8. They've had that many chances to turn this around. We're in the rupture era. Right? Between 2026 and 2029, that's all they got. Right? Meaning is about to become a non-optional for them. Stillness is about to become non-optional for them. Truth is about to become non-optional. Because once everything can be generated, curated, and streamed, the soul will revolt. And the thing is that if it doesn't happen by this little window in 2029, then collapse is no longer slow. The whole culture freezes over. Not in drama, in silence. And that's when it's going to be our hardest day. Because people think whiteness is going to fall in some kind of explosion. It's not. It's going to be quiet. And that's going to be the hardest thing to accept. That they walked themselves into something and broke down on their own. That's going to be the hardest thing for people to accept. So there's a bunch of things. There's key signs to look for. If it's going to happen. But they need to look into this. Right? They need to look into how to metabolize. But in short, can white America turn around? Technically, yes. Is it likely? Extremely unlikely without a spiritual rupture. Last window, 2026 to 2029, in my opinion. What happens if it misses? Cultural death inside of a curated living. Collapse hidden behind branding. Okay, And what will real change look like? Mass, public, uncurated grief, restoration of memory, and belonging outside of empire structures. The window isn't closing because God's mad. That I want y'all to get past that. It's closing because memory can only wait so long inside a body before it either blooms or breaks. Whiteness is a survival identity that is burning its own roots. It has a tiny chance left of becoming human again, and it needs to give up being exceptional to do it. It has to die as whiteness to live as a memory reborn. The real battle is not politics, really. It's whether meaning will be stronger than survival fear. Okay, so just so y'all hear about what this is, because this is like a really unique situation.
This is all I got from this video. He is really very brilliant, and a very big shout out to him. I think this is my first time I'm bringing his video here, but you know, one thing I know for sure is that my people are so brilliant, and we keep learning, right? So while I was going, going through that, I also decided to also make my own research and also hear what people got to say about this, right? And he also proved, like this young man proved a point that the fight is actually it is not a fight for Black people. I hope you understand that, and they need to fix this. This is their system. It is not us. We did not create the system. They are the ones that create the system. So who is to fix it? They absolutely got to fix it. And I am going to, at the same time, say that it's a kind of pathological narcissism on a cultural kind of a ground, because cultural and also racial scale. You know, when people are incapable of grieving, like, how is it that you do not grieve as a person or as a people, and recovering the memories because of the way they are raised? I feel like they were raised to be narcissists, and they have these narcissist behaviors and beliefs. Check it out. Maybe I am talking off point, but sometimes I don't know if they call it white guilt or something else, but if you look very well, you can also understand that they have this fear of retaliation. They have this fear that also one day the Black people and the minority group, right, might that they might kind of wake up and become kind of comfortable in the system that they created. And when they become comfortable in the system that they created, what is going to happen? It means they are kind of a little bit at risk, because all this while all they want is to make you uncomfortable. And when you are uncomfortable, you are not going to function. I don't know if you understand that. For example, let's assume that I am homeless. Or I am financially down, right? It's going to make me uncomfortable. And sometimes when you are uncomfortable, you are not going to perform, right? Sometimes performing well, it's only some percentage of people that performs very well when they are uncomfortable, right? But majority of people do not perform when they are uncomfortable. When they are uncomfortable, things don't go well. But when they are comfortable, things go well. So they try as much as they can to make you uncomfortable. And when you are uncomfortable, then things go wrong, because they do not want you to be relaxed. They do not want you to be comfortable, so that you all do not have the time to get yourself all fixed up and retaliate. I don't know if this does make sense, but it does make a lot of sense for me. Some people are their performance is always like, when I am uncomfortable, I give out my best. I don't know. So that's why sometimes when I am working on something, I don't make myself very uncomfortable, right? That is also when I am preparing for exam. I don't sleep a lot. When I sleep a lot, I am very relaxed. But when I sleep like 3 hours, I am not relaxed. And it keeps me I am off to execute that plan that I have. So when I am done, I get some rest. And I also know how to balance it. But this does not mean that everybody operates on this frequency, right? Majority human being, everybody wants to be comfortable, including me. So if you ask me, I want to stop writing exams. I don't know if that makes sense, right? I don't want to write exam anymore, so I can be comfortable. But sometimes you have to make yourself uncomfortable to get some certain things. I don't know if this really makes sense, but for me, it really does make a whole lot of sense, right? And some people do not understand what grieving means. Some of them think it's weakness. It is not. That's why when people tell people not to cry, or they tell you that crying is only meant for women, that is not a good thing to tell people, especially when you're a man or something. Or when someone is a man. No, don't try to keep someone's emotional or grieving side of the person, right? I'm talking to my people, not to some people that say that they will never grieve in their life. That it's their problem. Grieving means that you are acknowledging death, right? And when you acknowledge death, it recognizes the death you caused. So one thing with them is that they have refused to acknowledge the death, right? And when you do not acknowledge it, it means nothing happened. So to them, everything that they did to people that look like me, nothing happened, because that's why they refuse to grieve. And okay, example, if you all look around, majority of these people, when we talk about reparations, how they should pay people reparations, people that look like me, their reparations, because it is long overdue, cut the check for them, right? What do you hear them say? What do you absolutely hear them say? They tell you that they owe you nothing, or they were not around when that thing happened, or it is none of their business because their ancestors or whatever they call their this thing and all that, they are not there. Well, they tell you, I am not ancestors. It was back then. But you are still enjoying those things that your ancestors left for you. Hypocrites. So all these things are the people, all these, like, when they refuse to grieve and they seem to be too comfortable and feel a certain way for certain kind of folks. That is my own people. Yes. So they do not want to acknowledge it. They do not want to accept that something happened because they refuse to grieve it. I really do hope, like, I make sense, but I think for me, making sense for me might also not be making sense for another person, right? So, but I am feeling that the way I make sense for myself, I hope that I am also able to make sense for someone else, right? I hope you absolutely, we understand this, but I feel like you all know this, right? And I think it might not be anything new to my people because you all have lived with these people. And if there is anything so far that I have learned concerning them, is also mostly what I learned from you people, and then or also give my own opinion. So in everything, I am just giving my opinion, and you all know what they do. Hurt people, and this has always been what they keep doing. I am just going to draw the curtain here. See you all in my next video. Bye for now. I love you all. I love my people.